you join us, Roz, when your hair's grown a bit and it's in a ponytail.
We have no choice these days, do we?
Oh, we've got no choice. Look at the roots.
Although they're open again, aren't they? Opening from the 4th or something?
Yeah, they are. I haven't texted my hairdresser yet. I guess she's going to be inundated, but I will text her at some point today and just say, just fit me in when you can. I don't imagine she's going to be able to fit me in from the 4th.
I quite like this lack of obligation to look decent.
I know. Yes, because there's no pressure, is there? Because everyone's in it together. So, well, you look great. So you're in your garden room at home. What's the view from your garden room, Roz? Can you describe it?
Yeah, so we haven't got any sheep at the moment, but I can see 3 horses eating hay under the trees. Yours is tucking in. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, and Shadow, what's she doing?
Shadow, she's just snoozing. So.
Oh, bless her. Is she lying down or snoozing standing up?
They're all standing up, actually, unusually. Yeah. So it's all looking lovely at the moment.
It's a beautiful day, isn't it? I mean, it's a scorcher, actually. It's a scorcher today. So so the horses are just shading under the trees, which is lovely for them. You have got your 3rd book in the detective series with your DI Meg Dalton. You've got your 3rd book coming out tomorrow. Or should I say, we're recording this, so actually it is today.
Yes, Thursday, yeah. So this one...
Cut to the bone.
Cut to the bone, yes, out. Today, if it's Thursday.
Yeah, today. So everybody go on to Amazon and buy that book, because it's a little cracker right from the get-go. It's a little cracker, Roz. I'm loving it. Of course, Roz, I'm not a crime reader. I'm not a crime novel reader at all. But what you get with your books is something very, very different than crime, because you get all this idea about how society is. You get psychological intrigue, there's scientific information in there, and of course there's the plot in terms of who done it, and how DI Meg Dalton and Jai work out how they're going to solve the crime. So tell us a little bit about how you got the idea. Some people have heard this, of course, but many people won't have. How did you get the idea for a crime novel?
The very first one was a few years ago now, and I always had this sort of vague feeling that I'd quite like to write a book, but it didn't really come to anything. I think I had a very busy day job, and I just seemed to have too much else going on. And then we ended up buying a place with some holiday cottages, and I found myself basically renovating these cottages and doing a lot of manual sort of knocking plaster off walls and all that sort of thing. And while I was doing that, I have wondered if it was the effect of working with builders. I started thinking about murdering people. And so, and these ideas kept coming into my head, I think, because I was doing a lot of manual stuff, but not so much mental work. And then when I was walking the dog one day, he disappeared off for ages. And you've got dogs, you know what it's like. It's never good when they disappear. And when he eventually came running back, he had something dangling from his mouth, and for a moment I thought it was a human spine. And I just thought, what would it be like if your dog found a body, and how intriguing that would be, and also probably quite horrible. But so that was actually the start of The Devil's Dice, my first book, which is that one. There's a body in a cave in the Peak District, because my walks, the setting is based sort of in Derbyshire in the Peak District, very much around where we both live. And as you know, we've got caves and woods and lots of great places to find bodies. So this one was found in a cave house that someone used to live in. And it was actually a Labrador that found the body, because Labradors are very good at that sort of thing. If there might be food involved, then they'll find it. So it sort of all started from there. It was a bit random. It wasn't one of these, you know, sort of, this is, well, once I'd started, it became very much like, right, I want to get published. But the very beginning of it was a bit random, I have to say.
Mm. I can remember. Do you remember when we lived in another village? We don't live together, by the way. We just for
We just
everybody
seem to
listening.
follow each other around.
Our lives run in parallel, and we live about, I don't know, 3 miles away from each other now, and we lived in the same village a number of years ago. And do you remember that there was a very, very steep and very narrow lane with the church up a very steep bank, and the graveyard was right at the top of that bank. And I always remember, I don't know whether it's Izzy or Indy, one of those dogs, and they picked up a little fragment of bone from from the bottom of the lane, because I was always really mindful that as I was walking down that lane, the bodies would probably be on the height of my head. Do you remember that?
I do. I didn't used to think about the bodies the way you clearly did, though.
But what you've done is you've quite cleverly taken that thought about seeing Starsky with the human spine running back towards you, and also the inspiration of wanting to murder the builders and
ex-colleagues as well. They're cropped up.
Yes, because
it's very cathartic, actually.
Yeah, I think the Devil's Dice was very cathartic, because you were, prior to that, you were a patent attorney. That's correct, isn't it?
I was, yes.
And what of the Devil's Dice, Roz?
So the dead person is in fact a patent attorney, which was fun. And I mean, partly they say write what you know. So I wrote about a guy who did a profession that I understood. And I had various ideas for sort of plots and red herrings involving the patent profession. I mean, there's not much detail in it, so it doesn't matter if you don't know about it. But it was quite fun. And of course, the dead people and the suspects bear no relation at all to anyone that I've ever worked with. Just a couple of people haven't spoken to me since, people I work with. So they've obviously drawn their own conclusions.
Oh, marvelous. I love that. So, in coaching, because we're doing this dually, really. So this is appearing on our Simply Changing coaching page, because, as you know, and where we met Roz was, we train people to become coaches. We are coaches and we train people to become coaches. And also we look after dogs from the dog meat trade. So I'm going to put this out into both of those tracks on Facebook, so that you will be speaking to people who rescue and rehome dogs from the dog meat trade, and also those coaches. So to the coaches out there, we encourage people to be able to step out of themselves, so if you get angry or upset, or as happens in life, that you can step out and see yourself from a distance. So and we call that dissociation. And I wonder, is writing a book, you said it was cathartic, is it cathartic because you're able to kind of orchestrate something from a distance, like the death of a patent attorney, for example, from a distance? Does that, enable you to deal with undealt with memories, maybe from the past, from a coaching point of view?
I think it does, yeah. And I think if you get angry about things or upset about things, a book is a way to explore those feelings. But as you say, in a sort of distant way. So your character is going through something. But it's very much about things. For my books are very much about things that I feel strongly about. So the first one and also the second one, really, there's an issue to do with assisted dying. So yeah, we've sort of been through that, because my grandmother lived to the grand age of 101, and by the time she got to that age, she really was pretty much ready to check out. But obviously we sort of knew that wasn't an option that she had unless she was able to get herself to Switzerland, which she clearly wasn't. So it was quite unpleasant, and that was something I was kind of angry about and wanted to think about from both sides. The book, although it's primarily a crime thriller, it's commercial crime, but it gave me a way to explore those things. So I've done that with all of the books so far. And sometimes if I'm angry about something, I can just think, oh, I'll have a Meg rant about that. So I can open up a document and Meg can say things that I'm feeling. I sometimes have to tone her down a bit from myself, but it is quite nice to be able to do that. Or you can put things into the mouths of characters that are more extreme than the things you're feeling. Sort of explore if you took something to its extreme. And you can get into the mind of a psychopath, which is interesting. So yeah, I think it's a useful thing. Although I'm writing about really dark subjects, it tends to make me feel better writing about them.
I'd never realised ever before that when you read a book that is a story that is being created, so it's a fictional story, fictional characters. I had always had some idea that was because a person had a story to tell, but I hadn't realised until you wrote your books that is about projection. So what I read in the pages of your books is very much about who you are, what you think. And of course we know that as projection in coaching, projection can be really, really useful. We have to be mindful of it, obviously, but it's really, really useful because we're really hearing what's important to that character. So, I mean, would you say that a large part of what you write about is that notion of projection? And does that enable you to settle, in life, settle more well with the issues that you are discussing and exploring in your books?
I think it definitely helps, yeah, because it always helps to see both sides of something. I think you can see at the moment, you go on Facebook and everyone's furious about everything. Yeah. And what the books force me to do sometimes is to get inside the head of somebody who actually thinks the complete opposite of what I think. And that is really helpful. And also to get in, I like my people to have a proper reason to do stuff. So I don't like to have just a serial killery type thing where the person's just a killer because they like killing people. I especially don't like it when you've got sort of a string of beautiful young women being murdered by someone who gets off on that. I wanted my killers to be, if not justified, at least to have a reason. And I mean, in my second book especially, I ended up feeling quite quite an allegiance to my killer, which might be worrying, or I made the killer kind of quite well-rounded, I suppose, and there was a lot of me in this person, I guess, as there is in all your characters, and a lot of my emotions go into all the different characters, and that's the only way you can write. They say write what you know, but you're obviously not just writing scenarios but you're writing emotions that and you're amplifying them. And that, I think, is a helpful thing to do, be able to step back from everything, and especially issues you feel strongly about. And so you're switching between the sort of right and left brain thing as well. You're kind of getting into the emotions, and then you have to step back and think more about the story and how it all works and what the motivations are. And that, I think, is quite a useful thing to do as well.
So you're taking a story and you're looking at it from different perspectives, with different people's experiences and involvement in the story. So that would be like, in NLP terms, that would be like taking on different perceptual positions. So do you find that the discipline of writing a story like that really helps you emotionally with the issues that you're writing about?
I think it does, yeah, because you are forced to do that perceptual position thing. You are forced to put yourself in the mind of somebody that believes the opposite to what you believe. So although I write the first two books are only from the point of view of Meg Dalton, while I'm writing from her perspective, I have to think through all the other people's perspectives as well. So yeah, I think it's really helpful. Everybody write books.
Yeah, everybody write books. So I've got a few more questions about your books, and then we'll maybe talk about the process of writing and how you learn that process and apply it and are successful, given that you are published by HarperCollins, and you have a great agent, and you know, it's all really successful, isn't it? So before we do that, just I can see that behind you you've got something on your wall. So do you plan your books out, and what is that behind you there, Roz?
So that's just a little bit of a family tree, actually. So the book I'm working on at the moment has got some stuff that happened back in 2001, and that's the people. But I've got big whiteboards, there's more whiteboards. So it depends what stage I'm at in the process. It's a bit chaotic. I don't have this wonderful structured process going on, and I feel like, I mean, I'm working my fourth. I feel like I'm still quite new to it, really. So I sort of, I'm not one of these people who has a really thorough sort of plot outline, but on the other hand, I'm not one of these people who just sits down and writes. I do a mixture. I sort of maybe do something like work out a family tree and the names and the relationships, and then I tend to sort of think through in a lot of detail what happened in the past, and what happened in the recent run up to the crime. But then I sort of let events unfold a bit more naturally for a while, and then go back and have a rethink. A lot of thinking about what's going on with all the people, what their conflicts are, what their internal conflicts are, what their sort of external problems are, because the book is all about giving your people hell, basically torturing them. And so a lot of thinking, what is the absolute worst thing that could happen to this poor soul at this point, and how can I make it worse, and all that sort of thinking, as opposed to just sitting down and saying chapter 1 this happens, chapter 2 that happens, because I can't do that. I don't really know what happens.
So that evolves through the story as you develop the story.
Yeah, to an extent, yeah. And I change things, and you know, it's kind of chaotic. I'll write a bit, and then I'll have a big rethink and write some more, and I'll have a new idea. And I mean, book 2, the one where there's a girl who's had a 10-year-old girl's had a heart transplant, and she's having nightmares, and it seems like she might remember something that happened to the donor, which Meg finds very unlikely. She's very scientific. The idea for who the killer was and why didn't come to me for quite a few months into writing that book. And it actually came to me as something we did together. I'm not going to say what it was, because it sort of gives away the ending, but it was something when we were doing something with the dogs, and I just became aware of this thing that shocked me so much, and I didn't believe it, and I went back and I had to look into it, and I was like, God, that is happening, that is true, and that's a motive for murder. So that can happen quite often. I'll sort of be walking the dog or picking up horse poo, and I'll think of something new or an extra layer, or even change the murderer. So it panicked me a bit writing book 3, because it was so chaotic, but now I'm just thinking, well, that's just obviously just my process, so I have to just go through it, not panic.
So book 3 is a book that is being released today, so that is Thursday the 25th of June.
That one. Yeah.
Amazing. So I think that I've loved both of your books so far. I absolutely love this book. It's got issues in it that are dear to my heart, and they're very, very focused on animal welfare. So, and I know that you've been itching throughout books 1 and 2 to bring those thoughts and those issues to the reader's awareness, and you've managed to do that really, really cleverly from the get-go. I said to you, it's kind of very powerful right from the start. So it thrusts the reader into considering the life of animals right from the word go. How important was that to you, Roz, to bring those principles and to be able to have a medium to discuss it and air those ideas?
Really important. I mean, the things that both of the previous books did discuss things that I felt strongly about, but my main overriding thing that I feel strongly about generally is animal welfare, and at the moment especially factory farming of animals. And I mean, obviously there's horrific things going on with dogs, but also even in Europe, this country, things going on with pigs were the animals I chose to focus on in this book. Things going on which you just wouldn't believe, given that we both have high standards. I mean, we do, that's the sad thing, we do have high standards compared to other countries. One of my big worries with Brexit and the negotiations with America at the moment is that those standards are going to be lowered. But the situation with pigs, the fact that even though they have banned sow stalls in Europe, so in theory a pig can't live her whole life in a situation where she can't turn around, she does still live a lot of her life in that situation because she's so much pregnant and having babies. And the thought of having these piglets and being in a position, sort of trapped in a cage, so she can't even reach around and nuzzle her own piglets. She's just lying there trapped like just a feeding machine where the piglets are nuzzling from, and then they're taken away from her really young anyway. It's more horrific than anyone can understand, I think. And I didn't want the book to be preachy or, it's a crime thriller, it's commercial fiction, it's aimed at just a wide audience. It's not just for animal rights. People are interested in animal rights. It's not it's not trying to say everyone should be vegan or anything like that, but I hope it might make people look at, the pork that they buy and think about buying free range or organic. And if I've already had people reviewing it saying they had no idea, because most people are nice people, they don't want to eat an animal that's lived its life in that situation, but they've just got they've regarded as more important things to worry about. And at the moment, everyone's worried about lots of things. So I don't want to come over all preachy, you've got to do this. But if people come out of the book a bit more aware, that's great. Because reading things like Black Beauty and the Plague Dogs and some of those books I read as a kid, also books about feminism, books about slavery, these books made me who I am, and I'm really grateful to the authors of those books. Black Beauty still haunts me, that bearing rain that they use. Those books started me thinking about stuff, and so if my books can make people think a bit differently about things, then that's fabulous. The main goal is for them to entertain people, but if they buy free range pork next time they go shopping, yay.
Yeah.
Or maybe don't buy pork at all, whatever.
Yes, exactly. I mean, one of the one-liners that I think Meg throws out there at one point is that the fields get spread with the pig poo. And it's what a terrible indictment it is that the poo gets to see the light of day when the actual pig doesn't. And I remember that really hit me hard thinking about that. And especially when poo does get spread over fields, it's a bit smelly, isn't it, for quite a few days. And I always think, I always think, oh my God, it's so smelly. Why are they spreading that muck at the moment? But I actually now will think about that very, very differently. So even though I'm aware of these things and have been a vegetarian for knocking on 40 years and recently a vegan, you are bringing new ways of thinking about situations, which I'm really grateful for, Roz. So when did that thought occur to you?
What about the poo, or about? I
About,
think,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, because we have that, don't we, around here, and we walk past the place where they keep the pigs, and we can hear them and we can smell them, and you just think, yeah, I've had the thought that, oh, we moan about, because we have holiday cottages, so it's not just for us, we worry about the guests, and then we think we're moaning about having to smell that for 5 minutes or whatever, and they live in that. You know, that's the least of their worries, and on a boiling hot day especially.
Yeah.
It's easier not to think about it, isn't it? But if there are some small things that you can do with your own diet, even if it's not, you know, not going as far as we've gone, even if it's just buying that free-range bacon or the organic bacon instead of the normal bacon, it's not a huge problem for people to do that. And I think a lot of people will do that when they've actually thought about it. So let's hope so. Compassion in World Farming have sort of got involved a bit as well. They've fact-checked it, and you know, they're really happy that something like this is being raised in mainstream commercial fiction. Because you sort of feel like there's a group of people who think about these things, and then I'm very aware that there are loads of other awful things going on in the world that I'm not focusing on. You know, slavery and children being abused and all sorts of awful things going on. So don't criticize people for not focusing on the same things that I do. But I'm very happy to be made aware of stuff. If someone says to me, oh, you're better off buying your clothes from here rather than here, because it, you know, the people get treated better, then I'm really happy to be made aware of that, if it's done in a sort of easy way, you know. So hopefully people are okay about that with the book. I've not had anyone so far who said, oh, I don't want to think about this, you know, I'd rather not. So I guess it is a crime novel.
It is.
I did have a blogger that oh, there are about 18 trigger warnings, you know, all the awful things that are happening in this book. I went through, it's like, yeah, okay, they are.
So the blogger was saying this is a great book, but be aware of X, Y, Z. What were they saying be aware of?
Oh, suicide, incest, stuff with animals. There were about 10 of them. I'm like, really? Obviously, there's murder, drug use, pretty much, yeah, trigger bingo we can play.
Yeah, you do deal with an awful lot of issues in this book. Just coming back to the animals, because of course that is something very dear to our hearts, and you have given Meg Dalton the role of being the vegetarian within the police force. So she is DI Meg Dalton vegetarian, and that sort of comes out in the previous books, but very much in this book. What was the reason that you wanted to make her vegetarian? I ask that because I kind of know that you've been itching to get the animal welfare issues across in your books. So probably I know the answer, but what was the reason, Roz?
I think partly it was the fact that I wanted to open up for so when I got my book deal, I actually had to pitch for 3 books. So when I first met my agent, I'd only written 1 book, and I'd never thought about whether it was a series or anything. But she said, oh, is this a series? And I like hesitated, and she said, yes, it is. But okay, it's a series. And then when she was pitching to editors, she said, oh, can you give me an idea of the next 2 books? Well, I haven't got any idea. So, but when I was thinking about books, I thought I do want a book to be about this issue, and it sort of made sense for Meg to be vegetarian, so that this would cause extra conflict for her in this particular case. But it also, I wanted to set her apart from some of the characters in the police force as well, who There's one character in particular who's not very pleasant, and it's just another way that she's a bit different, really. I mean, it's funny because I started writing it the first one probably about, well, 5-6 years ago now, and it feels like being vegetarian now is very mainstream. I mean, being a vegan is fairly mainstream, but even 6 years ago, it felt a bit more of an unusual thing for a cop to be vegetarian. And there aren't very many vegetarian police in crime series, because I've had the odd blogger has said, oh, I'm doing a blog of vegetarian cops in crime series, and there's only about 3. So I thought it just made her a bit different from the norm, I suppose. And also, there's a lot of meat in Meg, obviously, and so that was something. I've been kind of mainly vegetarian and now mainly vegan for a very long time, so it made it easier for me writing her in a way. I couldn't have imagined her going, eating a ham sandwich or something. It would have felt really weird.
Yeah, definitely. So she's a good guy, and you've given her a lot of challenges. One of the things that you have said recently is that in terms of coaching processes, that this thing about self-limiting beliefs. So what you do is you weave in a range of self-limiting beliefs and ramp up the pressure. This is not what we do in coaching, by the way, but you ramp up the pressure and put her under an awful lot of pressure to be able to resolve her own personal issues. So is this something that you are constantly looking for in terms of her developing strong beliefs about herself, but you have to put her through the mill first?
Yeah, and it's actually easier with a standalone book than it is with a series, because in a standalone book you've got a one-off, and you've got a character, and this is what I'm working on at the moment. You've got a character who this book is going to be the most traumatic experience of her life, and the book is going to be about addressing something that she's avoided addressing. So like a big limiting belief. But instead of with a coaching process, you do it in various clever ways for the person. A novel, and it's not just me, all writers will be doing this, whether deliberately or not. A novel basically beats them about the head with their limiting belief until they let go of it through circumstances. And it's almost a bit like with the clicker training that we do, where you reward the good behavior. We don't punish the bad behavior, but in books you do. So as soon as that character does something where she's not moving on from her belief, you basically hit her with so many bad things. Like the one I'm working on at the moment, the girl has an issue with trust, which is not surprising because her teenage brother massacred her family when she was young. So she can't trust people, not surprisingly. But throughout this book, she's going to have to learn to trust people to an extent, or she's not going to get through what I throw at her. So it's a much more brutal process than coaching, but it's still about addressing those core beliefs. People feel they're not worthy or whatever, and they have to dig deep, and they have to sort of really find out who they are. The book is about, a lot of the book is about who that person is. So it goes quite a lot deeper than just a sort of a nice plot. You design your plot specifically to make the character go through this growth process, I suppose. And that's what I'm working on with book 4 at the moment, trying to plan that out.
So Roz, it sounds like an alternative to the coaching approach.
I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. If someone asks you if you want to be the hero of a crime novel, then just say no.
Definitely. So you can't imagine any sort of boot camps for acting out crimes in order to overcome your self-limiting beliefs. That's not something that you're advocating.
Well, it could be interesting, couldn't it? It could be quite fun putting those camps together, but I wouldn't choose to go on one myself. I think I'll have some coaching instead.
I'm very mindful, obviously, work that we've been doing with Liz Abraham, who's part of the SAS Who Dares Wins team, and she's a specialist in resistance to interrogation. Very, very interesting and clever lady. And we've done a series of those chats, and I could just imagine how she would be so up for doing a boot camp.
Yeah. I suppose some of these things where they put you on an island and they make you do awful things, I mean, they are, I suppose, a bit like this, aren't they, really?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wouldn't want to be on one of those islands, but some people do.
Yeah, lots of people do. And that makes good telly for us, doesn't it? Because we can watch from the comfort of our armchair and imagine what it is like. But really, we have no idea how cold or how harsh the conditions can be. Roz, just tell us a little bit more about Meg. She's a very interesting character. How much of you is in there, and how did you develop her into this, incredibly feisty, but very, very human and real character?
Yeah, I suppose there is a lot of me in her. She's a slightly more kick-ass version of me, I guess. She gets herself in some scrapes that I wouldn't want to be in. She's a bit younger than me. I deliberately gave her sort of plenty of years ahead of her in the police force, potentially. Although I know some people just don't age their characters, and that's another approach. But yeah, so she's mid-30s when the series starts. And I wanted her to be a sort of fairly ordinary person, so she's not, you get some of these super glamorous detectives, don't you? They're sort of apprehending criminals and wearing a pencil skirt and high heels and with their hair all beautiful, and I wanted her to be not that. So she's a bit fat, and she's a bit chaotic with her eating and stuff, and she's a bit disorganized, and she's probably got cat hair all over her top. She's got a cat who she adores called Hamlet. Hamlet can never die. But yeah, I sort of wanted her to be kind of like my friends, really, the sort of people that when they're up against it, they can be really strong, and they will defend things they feel strongly about, but they won't go out of their way. If you give them a choice between sort of chasing serial killers and having a nice cup of tea, they'd probably opt for the cup of tea in preference. But she ends up, because of her job, finding herself in these horrible situations. All my worst nightmares Meg has. She has to play them out. Lucky Meg.
So she's an incredible character and very, very likable. And I remember in book one, right from the get-go, again, you hit us with a very clear idea about who she is, and the things that she's resolving in her life as well. Because in the first book, she's transferred, hasn't she, to the Peak District,
Yeah.
and through the book we recognise that there are some unresolved issues back in her previous police department. So I love that subplot that runs through the Devil's Dice, and how we just, you get to the end of the book and you really like her. She's like one of your best buddies. And I really like that. You can't wait to hear what she gets up to next, which is a really, that's a great read when you've got your readers to that point. And I know many people who've read The Devil's Dice and Dead Man's Daughter, and absolutely loved them. And not just people that we've thrust the book in front of, but many people who bought it.
Actual strangers.
Exactly. Exactly. Because we do our marketing hype, don't we, Roz, when we're out and about, and I go, oh, we met Roz and she wrote this book, and it's a really good.
Honestly, if anyone wants a PR person, you should employ Louise. She's amazing.
Oh, we love it. We do have such fun with it. I do it with the dogs as well. I'm out on the trail with the dogs walking away, and I carry my business cards with me for the charity. If anyone talks about dogs, out come the business cards. There you go. Get in touch with us if you want a beautiful dog from South Korea. So and it works. I have to say, we've sold loads of your books, and we've got great events and homes with the dogs as well that way. So it's good stuff. So to bring this to a lovely close, can you tell us a little bit more about Cut to the Bone? So tell us, give us a kind of a synopsis of what that book is about and why people should go out and read it.
Okay, so I'm going to read you the blurb because that sort of tells us what it's about. So when beautiful young social media star Violet Armstrong, so this is a girl who basically became famous for barbecuing sausages in a bikini and posted videos of herself, and it sort of all went a bit mad, so she's become accidentally quite famous. So she goes missing in the middle of a scorching Peak District summer. The case sparks a media frenzy. The clock is ticking for DI Meg Dalton and her team to find Violet before online threats explode into real-life violence. And then the blood and hair of a young woman are found in an empty pig trough at the local abattoir. So that was fun.
Dun, dun.
The more Meg finds out about this unnerving case, the more she becomes convinced that something very, very bad has happened to Violet. With temperatures rising and the press demanding answers, the case is about to take a terrifying turn. So that's the slightly over-the-top blurb that we have on the back of the book. But there's some creepy stuff as well. There's a few sort of myths, the creepy myths and legends I like to bring in. You know, we have weird myths and legends in Derbyshire. So there's the myth of the pale child in this village. It's a made-up village, but it was created after the Ladybow Reservoir was flooded. So anyone who lives around here will know about that. And the weird thing about that, when they flooded the reservoir, they drowned 2 villagers. And so I imagine they built this new village to house some of the people. But when you get a really hot summer, the drowned villages come back. You can see them. And in the summer of 2018, one of these villages appeared. I'd actually written most of that already, so I'd made up this super hot summer. And then it happened. So I was able to go and have a look at the villages. So yes, the myth of the pale child, that if you see her in the woods, it means you're going to die. And people seem to have seen her and then died. And this social media star, Violet, she saw her. Now she's disappeared. So it doesn't look good for Violet, but anyway, Meg has to try and work out what happened to her.
It really doesn't look good for Violet, and I know that you and I have talked about various plots for this book as you were creating it, and I still do not know, because I haven't quite got to the end of it yet. I still do not know what happens to Violet. So, and I genuinely don't, and that's amazing, because I've been party to some of the considerations that you've had for the plot. So that's amazing, actually. That you can read it and you really genuinely, oh, I know what's going to happen here, but you genuinely don't. So it's testament to your writing ability. And I have to say, a little lamb gets rescued from a cliff, which is fantastic. So it's a really lovely moment. And I have to ask, is there a love interest in this for Meg? There's always a little frisson running through something, but do we get somewhere with Meg, or are you prepared to say?
So she does quite like someone in this book, but I can't really say any more than that. I mean, it's very dull when people actually get together, isn't it? So her and Jai, my German editor, said to me something about they can never get together. And Meg, she must have no dependents. They are inconvenient and annoying. So she's obviously not allowed. She's not allowed to have kids or anything like that. She's got a cat. So I said, she's got a cat, is that okay? Apparently that's okay. But if people have a dog or kids, then apparently readers spend the whole time worrying about the fact that the dog or the kids are not being looked after, which I do that with stuff on the telly. Like, yeah, but you left the dog in the car.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where is the dog? What's happened to the dog? I can't relax until the dog is safe, or the cat is safe, or the horse is safe, or whatever it is. Yeah, definitely.
No mention of children there.
They're human, right? They're human. It's different. Roz, thank you so much for spending this time with me this morning, and a really, really good luck on the launch of Cut to the Bone. And I know we'll see it in the bestseller list. I know that you have had some great, really, really great testimonials, and in mainstream newspapers and magazines, everybody's reading it. And everybody's saying great things about your writing. What was the most recent one? Do you remember? Do you have the quote?
The Daily Mail.
It was the Daily Mail. What a quote! Do you remember what they said?
It was something like confirms me in the top rank of British crime writers, or something bizarre like that. I love the Daily Mail now. It's like my favourite newspaper.
With your first book, The Devil's Dice, reviewed in the Times, and although you probably can't remember exactly what they said.
Well, I probably can, because I probably quoted it here.
Oh, go on then, give us a quote.
What did the Times say? Oh yeah, The Devil's Dice is a terrific debut by Roz Watkins. It teems with shivery atmosphere and introduces a cop quietly different from most of the women detectives in British crime fiction today. And it was the Times Crime Book of the Month.
That's amazing. Amazing.
That was a high point. Yeah, that was a high point.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And I have no doubt that Cut to the Bone is going to get absolutely many more of those accolades and many more of those testimonials. Roz, thank you. Sorry, go on.
Let's hope so. Fingers crossed.
Thank you so much, Roz, for your time this morning. I know how busy you are. You can get back to writing your fourth book now.
Thanks ever so much. Really
All
great
right.
talking to you. Cheers.
Take care. Lots of love. Bye. Bye-bye.